Good morning. I'm Sarah Bean, editor of FMJ, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar, Meeting Compliance in a New Culture of Accountability. From January of this year, the Building Safety Regulator formally separated from the Health and Safety Executive. The BSR is designed to raise safety standards across the built environment and introduce a stronger culture of accountability, transparency, and proactive risk management. This shift places facilities managers in a more strategic safety assurance role, far beyond routine maintenance, to ensure robust health and safety management across their sites. This webinar explores what this new regulatory landscape means for FMs when ensuring health and safety. We've brought together a great panel of experts from health and safety and FM to talk about the implications of the recent changes and what they mean for the sector. I'll be putting a series of questions to the panel, but I'd also love your input. So please do post any queries or comments and we'll get to them towards the end of this session. I'll start by asking the panel to introduce themselves and begin with Chris, please.
Morning, everyone. I'm the European Sales Director at Watco. I've been here for 19 years. Look after the sales teams, technical sales across the UK, French and German sales offices, as well as other countries we operate in, such as Belgium, Poland and the Netherlands.
Brilliant. Can I go to you, Kate?
Yeah, morning everybody. I'm Kate Gardner. I'm one of the health and safety consultant trainers with International Workplace. So I've been a facilities manager and working in the health and safety field for over 30 years. So lots of change. I'm looking forward to talking to you this afternoon.
Brilliant. And we'll go next to Steve.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Downey. I currently work at Just Eat Takeaway, the food app company. I manage their operations department, workplace operations department for the UK, Ireland, and Germany. That's my segment. My team helped me run these sites. So I'll happily share some insights from a facilities point of view today. I've done a range of FM over the years. I've done it in-house, outsourced, for managing agents and so on. And I always find that when you've worked at a variety of places, you learn things from a different point of view. But yeah, looking forward to today's session.
Thanks. We do have another panelist who's having a little bit of trouble getting on, but hopefully she will join in us in a minute. But let's kick off with a question to you, Chris. From your experience, what are the most common safety risks customers approach you about regarding sites, if, for instance, around areas like slips, trips, and access routes?
Cool, thanks, Sarah. I mean, the most common risks for customers talk to us about, are still the traditional slips, trips, and falls, and that's across a wide range of environments, manufacturing sites to supermarkets. So where we just have employees or areas where the general public do join the sites as well. We tend to see this most often in high traffic and operational areas. So things like walkways, loading bays, stairwells, car parks and things like that, essentially anywhere where people and vehicles are moving quite regularly. But it's rarely one single issue sort of causing the risk, which is why it can be so difficult to keep on top of for the facilities management companies or in-house FM teams. More often it's the result of surfaces gradually deteriorating over time and not being kept up to date. Worn floor coatings, they originally started as anti-slip, but they've just been worn and ground down and not kept up, or potholes always in the media, especially sort of over the winter time. And then sort of standing water can very quickly turn surfaces into a slip risk, or even water getting underneath the floor coatings, which are put there for a health and safety reason, to start lifting. And then you've got visibility, highlighting of step edges and things like that. So it's a whole variety of things.
Brilliant. Kate, there has been so much interest in this webinar because people are still trying to get their heads around what the changes mean to them. I know it's a huge sort of question to get you to try and press it into 5 minutes, but can you talk about what the legal changes really mean? People think of it as just about fire safety and high rise, but it does cover a myriad of other issues, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Building Safety Act is it's pretty much a fundamental shift in how we look at building regulation, from kind of reactive compliance-based model, which is what we're typically used to much more life cycle and risk-based. And from an FM's point of view, it's not just about another layer of rules into the framework. It's much more about how do we change mindset around accountability and day-to-day practice. And when you actually look at the regulatory regime, what's really changed is the fact that the Act, the New Building Safety Act, looks very much at the holistic building. It looks at the design and the issues around design, what goes into construction, what you need to do to ensure safe occupation, how do you refurbish safely to take account of what those changes might have, and then what may you need to do at the end for demolition. And the key mechanisms that they've introduced are around the gateway regime. We often hear about these different gateways. You've got gateway 1, which is all about the planning application. What do you need to do to evidence to building control, which is now run through the building safety regulator, how you are going to design and build a building. Once you get approval for that, you then get your gateway 2, your pre-construction, and that then will lead on to a new area, which is the gateway 3, which is where they're looking at the regulatory compliance before occupation. So if you're looking at higher risk buildings, so these are typically the buildings 18 meters or more, 7 stories. They have very strict protocols now. A lot of this has been introduced since the Grenfell fire, and this duty holder regime for managing this uses similar language to the stuff we're used to in CDM. CDM's been around for a long time. So we talk about clients, principal designers and principal contractors, but some of the responsibilities in those principal designer, principal contractor areas are slightly different depending whether you're looking at it from a building design and safety perspective or whether you're looking at it from a build and occupation. But, you know, a lot of this is about adding in this extra layer as well. You've now got these people we call accountable persons or principal accountable persons, who are typically going to be the building occupier, the building management team, who are going to have an additional layer of responsibility on them to maintain the paperwork, to maintain the processes, to have the conversations with the occupiers of these buildings. So we're talking about BIM for a long time in the facilities management sector, but this is now where that digital golden thread information now sits. You know, if you're going to design a building and you're going to occupy it, you're going to build it, you're going to maintain it, you're going to refurbish it, the data should be digital, it should be accessible, it should be up to date, and when you're looking at things like the safety case, it's now about how does your building demonstrate the fire and structural risks are properly identified, but then properly mitigated and managed for the life of the building. So it's, you know, the regulatory regime is really meaning that the responsibility is sitting now very much with those who create and manage the risk to have a holistic review of what have we got, who are the people occupying it, what do we do to ensure compliance. So it's a little bit of a change, but it's just adding into that layer of how do we ensure that the people who are occupying, living, working in these spaces are able to do so safely.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Steve, I want to get to your sort of, because we had a bit of a chat before this, and you were talking about you not only are the operations FM, but you also oversee a lot of the health and safety people. So I wanted to get your view of what you recommend organizations do to kind of communicate these changes, because it's got to be right throughout, as Kit says, a golden thread, right throughout the business.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think when I first came into FM many years ago, I think 12 years ago now, we were dealing with like hard and soft services. But the way FM has now evolved, like we've recently rebranded our department in Just Eat to Workplace, because we're more than just facility managers. We are engagement managers. We are trying to build a community within our company. We are doing health and safety. We are doing hard and soft services. You name it, we do it. We wear many hats as workplace facilities managers. But I find that to different audiences, we talk differently. So, for example, we have community pages, we have Slack channels for each office, and people in my offices who run them, really engage with staff. So it's not just about health and safety. They like engage with like perks, what are happening in the office, local things, what are happening in the office. We do use comedy sometimes when someone loses a phone in the office or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is you build that engagement. So when you go for a really serious piece of something changing, I don't know, like a fire drill's gone off, let's do some lessons learned. People respond to that with emojis in our Slack channel, and listen to people in my team and take things seriously. So I don't know, making this up on the spot, but like, don't bring cups out of a building when the fire alarm goes off. But people wouldn't read those posts or take them seriously if we didn't have that engagement piece behind us. But yeah, times have really changed now in workplace. Like we are so much more. But yeah, with my team especially, and teams I've managed at other companies, you bring up things in your one-to-ones, you bring up things in your team meetings, you discuss things what are coming out, but you do it in a nice way as well. Like, people are allowed to ask questions, people are allowed not to be experts in these subjects. You go to external, contractors if you need to get that extra support and guidance. But working with like leaderships in companies as well, you want to have your place on the table. You want to introduce yourself. You want to tell them, legislation's changing. Can I have an invite to discuss this? This is what we intend to put in, propose in the future. But I think the final group I just want to talk about is contractors. You really do need to meet with your contractors regularly. I know this is like probably teaching everyone on this call things what we already do, but regular QBRs, governance behind that, making sure that they are following these changes. Because when you outsource certain services, you want to make sure that they are doing what you need them to do. But yeah, I think times have changed in workplace. I can't say this enough. We are engagement officers now. Like we this is what we have to do. We have to talk, um, you know, continuously and promote things.
It sounds like a very positive approach to it, rather than saying you thou cannot. This is a positive way of making people engage with the health and safety regime.
Yeah, I think everyone has a different style of communication.
Mm.
My style is not to preach at people. My style is
Yeah.
to bring people on the journey. If someone doesn't know something, that isn't a bad thing. Let's teach people about it.
Mm.
Let's communicate this right. But at the same time, you want to communicate things, but get engagement back. There's nothing more than sharing a document or putting up a sign around your offices and people don't read it. So you want to build that engagement. Like, come on, we're a department, will add value to our
Yeah.
company. And it could be just reaching out to providers to get free drinks in your office from a sponsorship company. But what that does is when you do those posts, your team do those posts, it gets people engaged. Oh, what are they posting next? What's coming up next? Okay, this one's a serious post, but I'm going to read it because it's that team who are very engaging. But yeah, communication is so important, and it's so you want to get people aboard and follow your journey.
Talking of communication, to see what I did there, Laura, you managed to join us. Sorry about that. Zoom decided to be very, very difficult this morning. Um, Laura is Health, Safety, Risk and Compliance Manager at ISS. So I'm really delighted we've got both Steve from the client side and Laura from the supplier side. Laura, sorry to throw the first question at you, but now you're here. What we're talking obviously about the impact of the building safety changes and your role as health, safety, risk and compliance manager. You have talked about using quality management, risk management tools. How do you use those in practice to sort of maintain health and safety on sites?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Yes, apologies, had some issues getting into the meeting today, but yeah, great to be invited. Thank you. So yeah, as a health, safety, risk and compliance manager, there's various tools we use. Some of those are really practical tools. So things that you would expect to see, such as good task-based risk assessments. You can't undervalue how a good risk assessment can really drive improvements and compliance. And we found that with our method statements as well, and trying to join those up with how people actually do the work. And getting subject matter experts to write those with us, and not just from us as a health and safety team. We like to make sure we've got clear and concise methodologies detailed, reflect the real work environment, and really focus on those delivery risks and how we look to control those. And obviously we use systems to help us, and we use electronic EHS systems, We use those to manage incidents, accidents, audit processes, really focusing on good root cause analysis, good old 5 whys. Functional risk registers form a strong part of our processes from a risk management perspective. That being led by our group function as ISS, because we are global, so we have some requirements from group. So we have to then, really have those at an operational granular level, and then building up to that top level risk based approach that we feed back into our group colleagues. They help us evaluate hazards, evaluate the risks, and implement effective control measures. And then we finish that off with regular audits and inspections. And we really push our audit program through our whole operational delivery teams and through the HSEQ teams as well. Really trying to create that proactive safety culture, focusing on reducing accidents and incidents, and really focusing on lessons learned. So we're having a good corporate memory, helps us to ensure legal compliance, and then in turn just supporting that whole continuous improvement piece.
Excellent, thank you for that. You hit the ground running. It's interesting as well what you're saying about the digital thing, because Kate was just explaining that you've got to have a trail now. And another sort of huge question, Kate, but just to sort of, can you put in context the responsibilities of the building safety regulator alongside the HSE? What is the differentiator for FMs? And also, if anybody's got any specific questions on this, please send them in and we'll try and get them towards the end.
Okay, now this is a huge area, but fundamentally, the core responsibilities of the building safety regulator are around how higher risk buildings are considered, planned and managed. So they regulate these high risk buildings, so those over 7 stories, over 18 metres tall, 2 or more residential units, hospitals, care homes, those kinds of things. They're acting as the building control officer. So no more have we got that option of going to a local building control or for an outside organisation. You now have a very specific group of people that are looking fundamentally at this area. They are the ones that are setting the standards for design and construction. So they're the ones that are looking very much at what product are you using, how are you using it, where is your supply coming in from. They're looking very much at overseeing competence of the professionals and the building control bodies that are involved. That's kind of the bit that directly affects kind of how a building is built and constructed. But there is a secondary phase, which is actually holding duty holders account across the entire life cycle. So whether you're at the planning, so this is where that, are you a client? Are you the designer, principal designer? Are you the contractor? Across the board, duty holders have got accountability at different elements of the life cycle. But one additional thing that they do, which is very different to what the HSE has traditionally done, is that the BSR has a direct engagement with residents. It's about ensuring residents are heard. So one of the things that came from the Grenfell inquiry was the fact that a lot of building residents groups felt like they weren't being listened to. They raised issues and concerns with regards to, missing fire doors or damage or fire extinguishers that weren't working, and didn't feel that their voices were being heard. And so part of this new BSR regulation is direct engagement with the people who are living in these spaces. This is, I think, the fundamental difference between a commercial workspace and your home. And this is what this is really looking at. These are people's homes. This is where they live. They need that confidence that if they have an issue or a concern, they are being listened to. So there's a lot more about engagement with the groups of people that live there, and giving them an opportunity to raise issues and concerns. So, that is a very new focus, and it's evolving and changing. Fundamentally, that the HSE hasn't changed what it does. So the HSE is very much focused on the actual construction of the building, the actual ongoing delivery of workplace activities. So, they will still be responsible for Legionella outbreaks. They will still be responsible for being aware of projects that are notifiable. They will still have the legal accountability for enforcement of all of the health and safety legislation. So they're very different. They're looking at very different things, but in order for a higher risk building to now get approval to be built, and more importantly, if you've got a building that meets that criteria, you now need to have it registered with the building safety register. What it basically means is if you have a building that you are building and it is not, it doesn't pass its gateway 3, that pre-occupation safety check from a fire and an integrity point of view, you cannot put people in that building to live because the building safety regulator has deemed it unsafe for people to occupy. So they're two very different things. Nothing has changed with the way you may get a visit from an EHO or an HSE inspector, but you now have this new group of people who are really focused on supporting the tenants who are living in the building.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, you did mention about sort of the regulations needing when changes are being made, you've got to look at the suppliers. Now, Chris, this comes down to you guys. You're dealing with a lot of sites, manufacturing, retail, commercial, whatever. Are you finding that there is, from the client base, are you seeing customers getting much more rigorous in terms of what they need from you in terms of advice, as much as what you're supplying them with and how it's been done?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the biggest impact of the regulatory changes with the accountability, more specifically, the need to demonstrate the risks that are being actively managed. In the past, a lot of surface-related issues were handled reactively. Damage would appear, a small hole or a crack in a surface would show up, but it would be addressed once the FMs could prioritise it, which was, more than likely frequently long after it had first appeared, and it's grown into a much bigger problem and with more disruption. But what's changing now is the expectation that the organisations can show they have a structured approach in place, but they understand where the risk exists on their sites, but they're being managed proactively. Started to influence the conversations that not just myself but the rest of the team are having with lots of customers, and customers aren't just asking how to actually fix a problem or a slip risk or a hole in their concrete, but it's how to actually prevent them happening in the first place. And that could be, some bare concrete and putting a protective coating on top of it, rather than just letting that concrete break up and wear over time. I wouldn't say it's a complete shift overnight. Take time to get into place, and the different companies are managing them all slightly differently. But the direction is obviously being set out and is very clear, and surfaces are increasingly being viewed as part of a wider safety and compliance strategy, rather than just something that is being worked on or walked on or driven over or something like that.
Brilliant, thanks for that. Really, both to Laura and Steve. Well, from Laura's point of view, how confident are your clients about understanding the new sort of enforcement side and the emphasis on approved people responsible for health and safety on their sites?
Yeah, so we have been since last year doing work with our clients, and obviously we're getting the other side. We're getting clients coming to us and saying, how are you showing you're compliant to the regulatory framework? So we've been going that way, and they are, they're coming to us as well. So we're really trying that joined up approach. I think we have a bit of a mixed approach and understanding from our client base at this moment in time. I think our larger organisations we deal with have a better understanding. They have generally people in these roles to actually help them and support and guide. But some clients, I think, still lack the detailed knowledge around the duty holding responsibilities and who actually needs to be appointed into these roles. I think that's what we're finding, particularly at the moment, and around those gateway processes that were mentioned previously. And I think smaller clients find it all quite confusing and don't quite know how to implement that. But that's where we can come in to help and support and guide. We are looking at targeted training, some clear communications, and some practical guidance that we can offer to our client base and help you. We are an FM provider with project capacity, so we are absolutely the people that our clients come to offer that guidance, and it's a real joined up approach. We're trying to help them understand the enforcement risks that they might have. And we've worked with larger clients. They've engaged with third parties to support them as well.
Yeah.
So they would come to us for that verification process, which I think is embedding a robust and proactive approach to building safety management across any individual projects, but also portfolios that we actually manage on behalf of our clients.
Great, that's very useful. Stephen, you, as we mentioned earlier, have sites which you're overly responsible for, but you'll have local health and safety people on. I know when we spoke before, you said about this sort of briefing these people. What would your advice be to FMs in that situation who are feeling pressurized that they're the approved person, even if they're not on site every day or even that often?
Yeah, I think it's really important that your contractors have a system where they can upload their risk assessment, method statements, insurance documents, and so on. So then when, as senior managers, you can go in and audit this stuff to make sure that your team are doing as they're trained to do. For example, if there's high risk works, has a permit been in place? Has that permit been signed off by the appropriate person, and so on? But I think it's just like having that audit history of there is a place to upload all these documents to show that we are actually checking these documents. I found that when I've done regional roles for managing agents, it was very hard to be at every site at one time. You would run multiple sites occasionally, sometimes 10 plus. I've seen FMs run up to 30 sites whilst there's staffing changes and so on. But I think there's a system like very, very similar to what I've worked on before, like Meridian, where you can upload documents. It sort of runs itself then. Other things to ensure things are being done right are, you have a CAFM system, assets are being maintained properly. You've got clear asset lists. They have been uploaded on the CAFM system. The jobs are being automatically generated to our providers. And sometimes on some CAFM systems, you can actually put things in the background. For example, if it was works on the cradle, it'd flag up straight away that work's coming up. And that's quite high risk works due to happen. So where's this working at a height permit before anything happens? But I think it's just having those governance pieces in the background, which just flag up this high risk work, and ensuring items in just general do get maintained.
Brilliant. Thank you. Kate, one of the things that we've talked about, obviously, FMs are responsible for ongoing basic safety. What kind of advice would you give? Because we've got quite a lot of FMs coming on this webinar today who are sort of doing health and safety courses and things, and you've taken a lot of these courses. What advice would you give them to give it a proactive approach? We've talked a lot about the digital thing, and Stephen's mentioned a lot of what he's doing at the practical level, and Laura. What other items would you recommend from a practical point of view?
I think from my point of view, a lot of it is actually understanding your building, understanding your systems, understanding your occupiers, and understanding your contractors. A lot of it comes back to communication. We see this a lot. A lot of people make lots of assumptions. So, well, it must be in place, it must be done. And I think the biggest thing that we've got to think about is we've got to try and find a way of moving from periodic test and inspection to fit a British standard timeline for testing, to try and think more about how can we manage and prove that we have got a safe building, whatever time of day, whatever occupation is in place. So a lot of that means that it's making sure that all the different duty holders understand what they do and that the systems are working smart. Smart working has to happen. We need to know, obviously, that we've got a safe building, that we've thought about fire safety, and we've linked that to, the simple things like when you're doing your fire door checks. Fire doors are not something you can look at in isolation. You have to think about the door set that it's in. And I've seen a number of fire risk assessments over the last couple of years where the door works, but then when you look closely at the actual door set that it's in, it fails because you can see daylight through it. So even if your door seals have got cold smoke seals on, the gap around the edge of the door isn't going to work because somebody's not checked maybe that the contractor who was doing that understood what the implications of making modifications to fire doors are. So, yes, we need to know what the structural risks are. Yes, we need to know what what's in the framework for the building, what the as-built drawings are, the maintenance records are. But actually, a lot of it comes back to recognizing that the change control for even the minor things, like we've got some minor works that need to be happening. We need to give them almost the same consideration that we would do the high risk stuff. Is this likely to have an impact on fire safety, integral safety, and how do we make sure that things like complaints are picked up and managed? How do we make sure that information is shared and that there's transparency, particularly where you've got residents in? How are you evidencing that you're listening to and there is that two-way communication? So a lot of it is now very much, it's no good just being experienced. You've got to be able to demonstrate your competency, and that's across all boards. So doing training is part of it, but so is actually understanding how to engage with your contractors. So, if you've got engineers coming in, I am not an engineer, but I need to understand what my engineers are doing, because if they then drill a hole through a wall and they don't fill that hole in with the correct product in the right way, and I'm not checking it because I haven't had time to go and check out the permit that's been issued to do the work, then potentially we've created a risk that gets hidden and forgotten and doesn't get picked up anywhere. So, a lot of it is actually, how do we become smarter? How do we use technology? How do we use better forms of communication so that we don't make assumptions? Because that is the worst thing you can do, is to make an assumption that it's been done right.
That's excellent. Actually takes me neatly to Laura. I know you guys have got this safe spaces together about this whole idea of embedding a safety culture. Can you just give us a bit of an outline on that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. This is something we're really proud of within ISS, actually. So our Creating Safe Spaces Together is our safety culture programme. And it goes from the top, from our country leadership team, with those individuals making commitments, what they are going to do, personal commitments to how we are going to look at behavioural safety, all the way through our placemakers who are delivering on our sites. An example of this is our violence and aggression campaign that we launched in 2025. So violence and aggression is a significant risk to our placemakers, but such as healthcare settings. So we're using Creating Safe Spaces Together to support clients to embed our consistent approach to manage the risk. And we're doing that by shaping behaviours and not just the production of policies and process. It's about really changing that behavioural approach to these risks. We want safety to become a core value. It's not just a focus area, it's embedded in everything we do. And what we're finding is with safe spaces that it's creating really clear reporting processes, good risk awareness in various elements, and staff confidence is growing, and that's through training, but real clear leadership commitment that we're experiencing. And we feel this is turning our client environments into safer spaces to operate, because our behaviours then impact our client operations as well, and how they see we as ISS are behaving. We are running now joint incident reviews, and we're embedding the behaviours, such as one of the behaviours is engaging with others. So we're engaging with our clients more. around feedback routes for that continuous improvement. So we're really hopeful that this will create an environment where staff feel supported, the risks are properly managed, and it's proactive. And therefore, we hopefully will see a reduction in incidents across our operational activities.
Great, thanks for that. Chris, do you find when you're talking to clients, do they report back on where the risks on their sites have been underestimated? Because you mentioned earlier about taking a more proactive approach. And obviously not telling tales out of school, but you must come across some situations where they're going, oh, we needed to fix that, but now we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, it happens frequently, unfortunately. But at least then they are, you know, they are now doing something about it. But you know, from our experience, some of the most underestimated areas is the condition of everyday surfaces, the places where people and vehicles are using constantly, like the entrance to your office. It could be walkways or car parks. There's things that are so natural and you see every day. It could be as simple as the arrows or the yellow lines on a car park that are wearing off. And because these areas are so familiar, you know, the gradual changes, the slight wearing down each day, each week, tend to go unnoticed. So what we see quite often is that these smaller issues are tolerated or have those workarounds, particularly when there's operational pressures. You know, teams are busy, access is always needed, they can't put the downtime in. You know, one example would be supermarkets that put a cost against each of their car park bays being shut for each hour. So everything comes down to, you know, operations and the monetary side of it and all the rest. But you know, it's the safety at the end of the day, and that's the most important thing. And you know, the challenge with that approach is that these issues, you know, rarely stay small. If you're forgetting or ignoring repainting some lines in one particular area, then does that go, you know, the same rule apply to the whole site. And surfaces tend to give early indications of the risk. If those signs are identified and addressed early, then the impact is much easier to manage. And it's not just about eliminating, you know, every tiny defect, but putting in a plan, getting used to having a look and identifying and fixing these areas as they come up, so you then don't just end up with a huge list of to-dos.
Excellent. And I wanted to do a bit of a round robin. I'll start with Stephen. Examples of where proactive facilities management, maintenance, repair, safety improvements have actually helped improve operational performance within the business. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be just each example, but in your experience, sort of things you can think of where you go, right, we did this and this helped solve a potential issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it not just even from a health and safety point of view, it's like having good life cycle works, making sure you have life cycle works across your portfolio. You know, a good CapEx budget in terms of like, the boiler keeps failing, the lifts keep failing, and so on. But spending money on, you know, good documentation to reduce downtime in general has, you know, significantly helped us, you know, at various sites I've worked at. Yeah.
Excellent. Laura, what about in terms of client sites?
Yeah, no, definitely. So echoing what Steve has mentioned, yeah, so really good, strong PPM programs, reducing equipment failures can reduce incidents, as again, less unplanned downtime, and clients will see improvements in uptime of things working and also lower reactive repair costs as well. We've seen that with a number of our clients, and also simple things as well as enhanced cleaning regimes and housekeeping checks have reduced slip, trip and fall incidents, which is actually a real common workplace injury. So that's something we really promote and push, is that program of you know, actual checks and balances to make sure we are creating safe work environments as well, and that has actually given an improvement and reduction in workplace injuries.
So what metrics do Stephen, sorry again, with Stephen, Laura, do you use to measure the sort of success of health and safety? Um, and Kate could probably talk about this as well. What you would advise as a way of measuring improvements? Because we're talking about communication, we're talking about regulatory, but we're also talking about taking a much more proactive, almost behavioural approach to health and safety. Maybe if I go with you, Kate, on this.
For me, a lot of it comes back to we need to stop thinking about issues in sort of silos. You see clients that go, well, it's nothing to do with us, it's our service providers. You see service providers going, well, we can't actually manage things if we don't hear it. A classic one is something like near miss. I was at a client site yesterday, and we were talking to the safety team, and somebody piped up, well, yeah, I saw a near miss the other day, but I didn't know how to report it. That's a really simple kind of, it goes back to what Stephen was saying about communication. We have so many fabulous systems. We have CAF-FMs, we have absence monitoring, we have accident reporting, we have near miss report. But actually, unless you speak to the individuals and you make it easy for them, we've all got smartphones, we're all used to using apps to communicate, and yet for a lot of businesses they still are almost expecting you've got to sit at a computer and you've got to download a formal document, and the language doesn't make it easy for people. So one of the biggest things that we have the ability to do as a group of people, whether we're a client, a tenant, a contractor, is engage with really good technology so we can enable safety. We talk a lot, I certainly talk a lot when I'm teaching, about the added value that good health and safety has. We talk about risk registers, we talk about risk assessments. These are tools that allow us to understand what could go wrong and make sure that we get it right first time. And yet we still see documents coming in that are not fit for purpose, that either too big, it's in there somewhere, you find it, or then they're so broad, so brief that you end up making an assumption, and that's where things go wrong. And we have to try and find ways of making sure that the tools and techniques we're putting in the buildings and in the processes are communicated and understood out by everybody, and they're used, because otherwise we miss really valuable opportunities, whether it's repair and maintenance or whether it's preventing somebody having an accident. We have to find a way of getting into the brains of people to almost go, well, why would you not want to do this? Why do you think it's difficult to, why do you think it's somebody else's responsibility? If you see something, make a report, have that conversation with someone so we can fix it, or we can change what's going on. But we've kind of forgotten to have those conversations, I think.
Stephen, you mentioned to me previously about asset lists, which I think kind of helps identify the risk. Can you talk about how that works in practice?
Yeah, I've always found that when I've run multiple sites, or I've inherited a site from another landlord, or naturally when multiple people have managed a site, there becomes that loss of looking after the site in my history of doing FM. And I just find that when you get someone out to put together a marvelous, fantastic, meaty asset list, what contains everything on that site, it'll tell you what the age of the equipment is, how likely when you're going to need to replace it, what does it need maintaining to SFG 20 standards and so on. And I just find that when you maintain things and you're being proactive, they're less likely to fail and cause damages. I remember one time inheriting a site many years ago, not for Just Eat Takeaway, and it turned out like the distribution boards weren't even serviced, no fixed wiring, and power issues in the site, potential trip hazard straight away. You can't see where you're walking. But what I'm saying is, from having asset lists and putting services and PPMs in place, you're stopping these sort of things from happening. Potentially, there's always going to be a risk, there's always going to be something what happens what none of us can control, but it's just trying to be as proactive as possible and demonstrate that we're doing our best to prevent things from happening.
Excellent. I mean, Chris, what would you say in terms of your speaking to clients? Are you seeing good communications with stakeholders? Because obviously you're dealing with quite complex sites, especially in the retail sector, which you mentioned earlier. So you've got the owners of the site, the people who run the site, the parking, outside access, warehousing, all that side, is it still sometimes being done very old-fashionedly? I mean, we hear with an FM, there's an awful lot of spreadsheets still in play.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that the communication has become much more important on that. There's a whole range of the way that companies operate, and that's some are still very old school, and some are asking us to provide all sorts of information to be able to put onto their systems, which you then get the sort of longevity of if the product is working, it stays within their system. Completely sort of different environment, but with architects, if it works when the building is built or refurbished, then it gets copied across, and it's good for us as a business for the selling products to help with these solutions, because we know that they work, and we've got the experience and do lots of different tests for either slip resistance or the actual longevity of how long we expect a concrete repair product to last, etc. So if they're in these systems, and we've got confidence in the Watco products that they work, and lots of other suppliers have got confidence in their products, but if they work, they generally stay within they stay within the systems, the manuals, etc. We're talking to people that operate in that way, and we're also talking to people that keep it all in their mind, and try and transfer information across to their other colleagues as well.
Brilliant. We'll be going to some questions in a second. I'll finish off with a sort of round robin question after we've done some of the stuff that's come in. But very quickly before that, Kate, I know you touched on training. What are the sort of basics? I'm thinking maybe if there's any of our attendees are at the slightly more junior end, if they want to know what kind of training they need to sort of keep up with everything, because a lot to absorb. What would you kind of recommend as starting points? Oh, you're mute. No, you're still mute. Ah, there, you're back.
The beauty of Zoom and it doing its own thing. I think for me, I've worked in lots of areas with lots of different training requirements depending on the sector. You need a really good, strong understanding of facilities management. It's certainly changing. So you need your facilities management knowledge, but you also need your good health and safety knowledge. And there's lots of different providers out there. There's lots of different types of training. The IOSH suite of qualifications is really good because it looks at it from a worker, a manager, and a director point of view. So it's a really good way of putting culture together and understanding how the different elements of safety work. If you're managing buildings, if you're in a more senior role, then it's still recommended that a NEBOSH certificate or equivalent is a really good baseline kind of qualification. It gives you that confidence to have those conversations. But a lot of it is about continuous learning. We talk about CPD. CPD is not just sending on a webinar, but it's reading articles, it's engaging with social media, it's it's having conversations with your contractors, it's finding out what you don't know and then working out how to actually make that process more understandable. Certainly talking to lots of people, and I've lost count of how many thousands of people I've trained in my career. The one thing a lot of them will come back to is going, well, I don't know how to say no, or I don't know how to challenge because I'm not an engineer. I'm just in facilities management, or I'm just and you stop talking about Justin. You're a team of people who are accountable and responsible for a building. So you need to talk to each other, and you need to use that knowledge to help build your own skill set. I can certainly remember in my early FM career, having transitioned from working in the NHS as a nurse to working in a public in a company where we were doing facilities management. I would stand and talk to the engineers and find out why they were doing something. That question, why, we look at it a lot in terms of accidents. When something goes wrong, you ask why. But actually, a lot of it is about knowledge. We need that knowledge. We need to kind of work out, how do we get the interpretation and the integration right? And that comes by, as a team, having these conversations. Why are we doing that? Why have we got to make this change? Why? It's about using all of the different people you've got and understanding. But you should have, if you're operating in an FM sector, you really need to have a basic FM qualification, and you should have a basic health and safety qualification. So something like an IOSH managing safely as an entry level is really good, and then looking at the broader field. But again, if you're looking at fire safety, lots and lots of change happening in the fire safety arena around competency. And are you competent? Are you able to demonstrate the knowledge, the skill, and the experience to be able to deal with some of the challenges that running particularly heritage buildings brings?
Brilliant. I mean, what's come through a lot is the communication stuff. And I did have another communication question to put to Laura, but interestingly, someone has sent in a question which I think is really interesting. How are you using technology to maintain that golden thread of information, particularly between a supplier such as ISS and a client like Just Eat? For example, checking our engineer was certified when we got work done. That's a really interesting one, Laura. How is the information from both your perspective and Stephen's perspective as client and supplier? How is that information shared? Because not all organizations use the same systems, for example.
Yeah, that's right. And we are often led by client requirements as well. So clients will have particular requirements around, for an example, one of our clients requires a competency passport. So we have to make sure that any engineers or operatives going on to those sites have gone through that competency passport for the role they're going to be doing, such as a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer. So we use those kinds of methodologies. We also use probably less technological solutions, and that's a compliance review. We have central functions that will do general contractor management, but then we do on-site reviews as well. So the FMs on those sites will ensure that a process has been followed before that operative is allowed to come and do works. And then we will have things like common data areas where clients will set up an area. It could be a SharePoint, for an example, and we have to load information in there and get a almost like an access permit from the client before we can start works. So there's various methodologies that we have to tailor depending on the client that we're working to. But the common theme is that we are always checking compliance to either a requirement, whether that be internal client or an actual legal requirement around who can come and do works in that area or on that piece of equipment.
Excellent. Now, Stephen, how does that process work from your perspective?
No, I completely agree with what Laura's just been saying. Obviously, it depends on different markets of what sometimes contract provider you have. If you're using a smaller company, they might not have an internal CAFM system. We use a Jura portal, which everyone has access to, so they can upload their job service sheets on this. It's not the perfect system sometimes, but we are looking to launch a CAFM system very shortly globally. But when I've worked at many other companies, if you couldn't afford a CAP system, there's many simple things you can do. You send a Google or meeting invite, you put their training certificates on it, you put their risk assessments on it, you put the insurance document and any other relevant items you need. And until you approve and accept that invitation, the works don't go ahead. But obviously you'd wait for people to come on site. But what I'm trying to say is there are many controls you can do to filter out potential future problems if you can't afford to have these very expensive systems. CAFM systems aren't cheap. And like we've all said, they're not obviously always a universal thing between every company can use and so on.
Excellent. I've got one other quick question for Kate, and then we'll do just a sort of a sum up. Regarding the BSR, are they just responsible for new higher risk buildings going forward, or are they going to get involved in existing buildings?
It is an existing buildings as well as the new buildings. So if you have an existing building and it meets that 18 metres or 7 stories, has 2 or more residential units, or is a linked building. So there's a whole raft of things that sit behind it. There is a really, really good document that's like a Q&A document that you can find on the gov.uk website in the building safety regulator area, which explains what you have to do in order to meet that registration framework. So if you have a building and it's based on numbers of stories, so it's you don't necessarily have to know the exact meterage. If you've got a building that's got a basement and 7 stories and a roof garden, and you're not sure does the roof garden count or not, the Q&A, the FAQ section, the book they put together brings you all of that information. If you think you are in a building and you don't think it's been registered, then you really need to be having those conversations with your landlords and actually working out, are we compliant? Because it is not being registered is one of the things that the building safety regulator could actually pull you up for.
Oh Lord, all right, that's very good lesson. There's been another question in specifically to you, Kate, on fire safety doors. So I will actually, if that's all right, I will email that to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Get back to the thing. So really, we've got about 2 minutes left. I just want to do a very quick summation. Really basic question, or a round robin question, really. How can FM leaders foster a stronger culture of safety within organisations in the future? My feeling is it shouldn't just be down to tick boxes, but can we sort of start with Stephen, Laura, Kate, and then let Chris finish off? Stephen, I'll go to you first for some reason.
It's just going back to engagement. We just need to engage. We need to, really how we communicate with people. We shouldn't always just preach at people with the fear. We should explain the story, take people on the journey. This is why we're doing this. This is going to prevent happening. This protects company reputation, and so on. Using things as an opportunity as well. I've had examples before where I've been in buildings and lifts haven't worked or been unreliable, but finding other methods to get people into the building. I don't know, we have a fire exit stairwell. Can we open up that door? Can we put a new set of doors on it to bring that access into the building rather than using the lifts? I'm just giving examples of like explaining you can find solutions for things without constantly causing fear. It's bringing people on that journey, like here's another way in, like finding solutions, and so on. But yeah.
Great. Laura?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. So for me, it's making sure that people are visible. They are going to sites, they're engaging with people on the ground who do the work. So in ISS, that's our placemakers who do that fantastic job of delivering for our clients. So our leadership teams do safe spaces engagement visits, and it's about those safety conversations. It's not a checklist. They might have things they would like to talk to placemakers about, but they're not going around with a checklist. They're going around and actually having chats over coffee, or asking a placemaker to show them what they do and how they do it. And it's really shaping those conversations. And that's people are always, I feel, in ISS are really proud to talk about what they do. So when a leader turns up and they're having that conversation, they're really happy to talk to them. And it's boosting engagement as well. So we do ask the leaders to record these checklists in a very simple way. However, it's showing that engagement is growing.
Yeah.
We're also trying to focus communications around the actual risks that we have, rather than just sending out endless communications. We're trying to tailor that around the actual risks that we're facing at that time to try and focus people's attention a little bit more. But that's just some of the things that we're doing around engagement and culture.
Brilliant. Kate?
I think for me, it's more about it's a mindset thing. We have got to shift from being compliance culture to being accountability culture. What that means is we need to stop thinking of ourselves as we are just maintenance managers. We've got to start thinking of ourselves as risk owners. We've got to stop going from bits of paper to evidence-based assurance. And we've got to move from just thinking about things as periodic checks to actually this is continuous safety management. So if we can embed that into what we do, we should see some big improvements.
Excellent. And Chris, one of the questions that came in is a lot of our surfaces have gradually warmed rather than failed. When can you get FMs to feel that they have the proactive ability to say this needs to be done now? That needs to be part of the safety culture, not we must do it, but we'll wait until it's almost at fail level.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on the coatings that we've got, sorry, I know we're running over time already, so I'll keep it extremely short. But these coatings, anti-slip coatings, use all different types of aggregates, and some are going to last a couple of months with the cheaper, less desirable ones on the market to really strong aggregates. So, there's things like PTV tests, a pendulum test value, on-site tests that can be undertaken. So even if there's a hint that the surfaces may be failing or wearing through and it's not meeting the PTV value or anti-slip value on there that is required, then these machines can be taken out onto site and tested within literally half an hour or so, and it'll give you a reading of how anti-slip it is. And I think just to sort of sum it up about, you mentioned about fostering the mentality of within organisations or so. As Laura mentioned, I think it definitely starts on the leadership side of things, has a massive role. And if these types of issues are being talked about at the top of any organisation, then just over time and naturally it will filter down into everybody within that organisation, and it's everybody's responsibility.
Brilliant. That's a great way to finish. I'd like to thank the panel for their time and help, and hopefully if anyone has missed part of this webinar, you can download it. We'll be uploading it on the site. There's a couple more questions came in, so I'll check those out and email them to whoever's been questioned, probably Kate on fire doors again. But anyway, I'd like to thank you all and stay safe, basically. Thank you.